the anatomy of the DCF. Let's do this for the Cardano Summit. And I'll just flick along. So we're talking about the DCF. My colleague Johnny has already talked to you on a session explaining the background to why we are talking about the DCF. So it's about Decentralized Consortium Funding. And it's a solution that is about governance, and it can be applied globally. It's not about a particular location, a particular industry, or a particular sector. So, what are the DCF objectives? And it's about creating a project execution machine. What do we mean by that? It's about getting things done. So we're looking at using technology, and specifically blockchain technology as our basis, plus some coding, to enable projects to get delivered. We want to have built-in governance, which we think is very critical, and we want to consider the potential imbalances you can get. But the challenge you're always going to get is potentially concentration of power, or lack of actual participation among consortium members and participants. So we also want them to be working in collaboration and really unleash the full power of a consortium or a consortia. So, and then leverage that talent and expertise. It's all about having an overarching vision, a distinct set of goals, principles, and community, so that everybody that's a stakeholder involved can adhere to. It's about balanced distribution of power. And in fact, if you note, there's a thing called Nash equilibrium, which is from game theory as much as anything else. And that's the goal of a lot of things, which is effectively equal distribution of power and no concentration. We also want to have effective decision making. So a lot of the mechanisms that people have put in place to try implement or enable Nash equilibrium often end up creating blockages, or things are very slow. You won't get decisions made. So again, with the DCF mechanism, the objective is to enable something that actually functions and can deliver. And it also delivers operational stability. So not wild changes, not lots of things going on, but deliver that operational stability. Now, let's have a look at the architecture. It's broken into 3 layers, layer A, B, and C. And this is our conceptualization of what the DCF architecture could look like. So layer A is the community that, if desired, authorizes the entire structure. Layer B is actually the mechanism itself. And that's responsible for the governance of the project or the execution. Now, it may be project or projects. The model can apply to both. Layer C actually addresses the execution of whatever has been decided by the DCF. We handle that by looking at our goals, which are broken down into executable work packages to deliver on those goals. The work packages are actually defined by the DCF founding entities prior to the recruitment of consortium-based, recruitment to the consortium, so that we can actually get people that allow you to deliver on those goals. Blockchain projects typically comprise different participants with varying levels of engagement and expertise, hence the notion of consortium. However, many projects or activities fit this description, such as NGO activities, where you have a large, diverse group of people that are supposed to deliver things. A consortium may include token holders or other funding mechanism, project founders and developers, managers hire with proceeds of the tokens or funded by alternative funding methods, third-party vendors, and related entities such as non-profit foundations and distributed autonomous organisations, which is a new concept as well, and use of the project's products and services. Because every project differs, the consortium for each project or set of projects will differ, and its composition will likely change over the life cycle of a project or projects. The DCF model accommodates these changes and dynamics. At a consortium level, governance holds the consortium members accountable for the execution of projects and the protection of stakeholder value. It's not just about shares or asset value. It's actually, if you've got an outcome that you want to ensure that you're getting value for that, and then you're not wasting fund, time, or energy. At a project level, governance hold project participants responsible for completing work and reaching agreed upon goals. A consortium must resolve and codify decision rights upfront. It's really important. You need to understand what's expected and what are the rules of engagement upfront. You can't leave that till part way through. You also need to decide who takes part in decision making, which types of decisions are put up for a vote, and who votes on each type of decision. The proposed DCF mechanism supports these accountabilities end-to-end with protocols of rule setting, dispute resolution, intervention, oversight, auditing, and communications. The mechanism operates continuously during the life cycle of the project or projects, with protocols executed by code or with human contribution as agreed upon. We do anticipate some human interaction from the outset with progressive automation and decentralization as code-driven processes mature. In short, not everything's going to start off being automated. It's not all going to use smart contracts. The reality is it'll be a combination and it will evolve over time. Looking at the DCF mechanism, implementation mechanism, it's basically layer B from the previous slide. And if you look, there are effectively 5 stages. So we have goals agreed. That is the critical bit. You need to understand what you're doing or why you're involved. Recruitment. So then who do you want in your consortium? Get them organised, get them recruited. You may need a funding campaign, or you may already have funding available. There is no reason that the DCF could not be applied to an existing running or funded project. Again, as long as the goals are agreed, you have engagement, you have partners or parties involved, you could apply the DCF still. In other words, put the mechanism in place to help you run and operate the project. Within the DCF mechanism, we have the in-life management. So what's actually happening during there? We've got some examples of that in there, such as, what are the regular communications that you're going to provide? How often do you communicate? What sort of progress reports do you provide? When are they submitted? And again, if they're done on chain and within the system, you should be able to clearly, and anybody could be able to see, you have an immutable record of what's happening, what people have been doing, and where you're at. Also, you have to consider most projects have an endpoint. So we should also have a mechanism for closing or finishing that DCF or that project. Now let's have a look at the key elements to consider. So, really importantly, we need to have a common set of vision, values, and what value we're going to deliver. To help us with that, we need to have some form of execution infrastructure. So we've got an agreement on what our values are, what value we're looking to achieve, and what vision we have, but we have to have an execution framework to enable that to occur. We then also need an information infrastructure, so disclosure and transparency. Again, the blockchain can help with that, and we can codify some of that. But a lot of this will still require human intervention. As technology progresses, we'll solve some of these problems and be able to implement it on-chain or with technology. Okay, we need some form of agreement. How do we agree on decisions we're making? So we need a ratification protocol or infrastructure. So we need some way of either voting or getting agreement and recording those agreements. And of course, the reality is there will be a dispute, or there will be disputes. Doesn't matter what you do, there's always going to be some disputes. And you need some form of oversight and some form of managing disputes and how you do resolve those disputes. Okay, we're going to talk a wee bit about proof of merit. The concept of proof of merit is actually really critical of one of those ways to prevent concentration of power. So each branch of power within your DCF, proof of merit can be used to link historic performance to levels of power and decision making. Now this is not totally ratified, or is this the perfect model? No, it's not. More research is needed, and certainly we want and invite global discussion on this, but we believe that proof of merit is one of the mechanisms that will help ensure that outcomes are actually what everybody wants and actually deliver on what's asked about. One possible implementation is with, potentially with some form of merit token, which can recognise your merit, and that would be voted by the community. Or also you could take it from the metadata of actual reporting and activities. So, a member of the consortium has actually delivered on something that was on time, it was within cost, or there may be other metrics that you use, but that could be stored in the metadata, and that could help prove or complement and actually validate that merit that is being applied. Again, you could actually get potentially proof of, tokens could be used, and you may get a proof of merit token on successfully completing. Or if there's a dispute and you fail, maybe you'll lose merit tokens. There's a whole lot of discussion in there, and it's an area of research that a lot of people are now looking at. Okay, we have a very complex roles and archetypes model there. It doesn't necessarily need to be this complex, and it could be, one party can do multiple roles. In the case of a blockchain ecosystem, protocol users, protocol token holders, liquidity suppliers, stake pool operators may all be part of that community. So that's effectively what we're talking in layer A in the earlier slides. Developers, suppliers, capital suppliers, customers, vendors, and other service providers may also be relevant stakeholders, and they may be part of that consortium. In cases where a DCF project is engaged to focus on strategic goals of social impact, non-profit organisations, governments or corporates, or the community simply means everyone who votes to ratify the community to start its work. So you could apply this model and you could make it a lot wider. Again, we have all the reporting mechanisms, we have a lot of the functionality and the smart contracts to execute and get things done, and we have the blockchain providing a transparent record as things progress. Not all members within the community stakeholders would be expected to be formally part of or actively necessarily participate in the consortium. The DCF Facilitation Council is in many cases an appropriate coordinating party to oversee the activities of consortium participants. This is what we call the consortium DCF Facilitation Council. The DCF Facilitation Council in many cases will be the largest segment of the governance category, composed of auditors, jurors, advisors and community representatives. So they're the ones that are going to make sure they're overseeing and providing the governance to make sure that you're actually getting or meeting the outcomes that you expect for the project or projects. You might have some funding entities. Now that could be through token, but it could be something else. So it could be a specific company, or it could be a government organisation or department, or it could be a decentralised treasury. The model can cope with all of those potential parties. So they're also stakeholders in the governance category, and they may or may not be part of the consortium. Again, the consortium should fit the project and the parties involved, and you've agreed everything up front. In summary, the two most important categories, stakeholder groups in the consortium are the executing entities and the governance. So the ones that are actually doing the work and the ones that are governing it. Let's have a look at our protocols. At the beginning of the presentation, we talked about the DCF mechanism and its constituent protocols, which link to 5 stages of the DCF process and can be executed by an algorithm or elected entities. Again, some of this may be able to execute it in code, but some of it may require human. And as technology and coding and platforms improve, more of this could be potentially executed in code. This is just one potential framework, and all elements, again, may not be required. However, the concept is looking for global input as well as discussion. So we are really looking that the DCF takes in global input and global considerations. The stages include, really importantly, you get the goals agreed. Can't do anything if you don't have any goals. You then ensure you get recruitment conducted. Who do you need as members of your consortium? You need some form of funding. Now that may be coming from a government department, or it may be a token event, or it could be some other event, or it could be a corporate that's providing that. But you need some form of funding. You then have to have an in-life management. So actually when you start the project or projects, you want to manage it within life. And you'll notice there's a whole lot of things that are occurring. So protocols, which are the layer below, so there's 16 of them, are either attached to one specific stage of the DCS process or they sit across multiple stages. And I think it's really important to see that, example, the DCF Facilitation Council protocol can run across all of them. Again, when you set up your DCF, that'll be part of the decision over who does what where and how it operates. We also need to understand decision rights. Again, it's critical to understand that up front. Clear delineation of roles is critical in effective decision making, with ambiguity putting the process at risk of stalling. If you don't know how you make a decision, or it's unclear, decisions may not get made or will be disputed. So any process that you want to occur will take a lot longer and be ineffective. Decision paths should only include relevant parties, specifically those responsible for decision making and execution. And depending on the stage of your DCF and what you're actually doing, it may be incredibly wide, including the entire community and all stakeholders, or in others it may be a more focused group depending on what's been agreed and how you want to operate. Coordination and faster response times are essential for this to become routine, and the DCF Accountability Framework achieves this via a 4-step process. The first stage involves entities, parties, putting their recommendations in and before it is formally made. It's agreed upon, with all reviews reflected in the final decision. Performing the recommendation is the final stage where the consortium then commits to action. So we've got some examples there, and if you look at that, you'll see that we're looking at different groups who make or are involved in decisions. And again, this is our example matrix. It doesn't necessarily mean that is the perfect one or will fit all situations. Let's have a look at accountability. So with accountability, that's where we believe proof of merit can come in. Merit is a concept designed to prevent power concentration and misaligned incentives within the consortium. So it's aiming for system stability, relying on it being among distributed entities. Positive, non-monetary contributions to the common goal should be rewarded and recognised. Negative, non-monetary contributions should be penalised, leading to increased accountability in the system. Proof of merit is a complex concept, and several blockchain platforms, and there is a lot of have been looking at proof of merit, and a lot of people are doing research on it. So again, we welcome contribution about how proof of merit could operate and how it can complement or actually achieve these goals to ensure you get a balanced outcome. So merit is really defined as a quality of particular entity that proves its historic usefulness within the system while serving as an indicator of future potential. So in other words, you look at what they've done. So the higher the merit, you can reasonably assume that in the future, you'll get value out of whatever's required of them. And it needs to directly link to decision-making voting powers with merit. And blockchain technology enables this to be quantified and tracked. And you can track multiple DCF protocols and how decisions are made. So you've got a record of what's going on and why something has merit. As I said, there's a lot more research required on this concept. Merit can be accumulated in three ways, with different forms of merit attached to each power dimension. We've got some examples there. I can give you an example now. So an example would be executive merit. Executive merit could be accumulated by executing work packages and meeting those KPIs. So you've actually executed something, you've achieved it, it's working, so you get merit for that. So a transaction takes place where auditor signs off completion for a consortium member, awarding executive merit. Ratification merit is gained through the community appraisal via formal feedback mechanisms. So there's a couple of examples of merit that you could apply. Let's get on to incentives. Well, one of those incentives is definitely proof of merit. And there may or may not be financial. If you're executing, you may be paid for doing that. But proof of merit could impact whether you do further work or are involved in further aspects of the consortium. Proof of merit is a bit of a driver of centralisation, but quadratic voting, which is another concept that we're talking about, disincentivises entities that could cause power concentration, making marginal voting power increase exponentially more expensive. So in other words, if you put all your votes in one pot, you have no other votes on other areas, and that actually may affect your impact on the consortium or your ability to actually be involved and deliver. So it actually, hopefully, or the intent is, it prevents power concentration. Again, we want more research on this, and we're looking for community feedback. These counterbalancing forces can enhance system stability and lead to homeostasis within DCF if the parameters are selected correctly. So quadratic voting, proof of merit, all those things, they need to be balanced out. Do we have a perfect working model? No. Have we got a model that we think you could start building on? Yes. Let's get on to the next one. There's some regulatory. Regulatory is an interesting one in that from a policy perspective, the DCF might be constrained by policy and legal frameworks. What do I mean with that? The thing about the DCF is it's conceptually decentralised and it's conceptually globalised. But that could prove a challenge for certain jurisdictions, certain locations, and certain regulatory frameworks. So, DCF is a new innovation decentralised governance model. So at some stage, we're going to have to work on how do we make this as potentially a transnational regulatory framework. Can this fit into some form of transnational regulatory framework? It's a hybrid governance framework in between standardisations organisations, either formal or informal, and open source consortiums. So it's somewhere in between. It is effectively a directed entity, but with community involvement. Two legal factors you'd need to bring about this, and I'm not a lawyer, so you don't quote me on this one, but things you need to consider, what legal form do you want for the DCF? Because some things still require contractual execution. And also the presence and observance of governance characteristics, principles similar to standardised settings. So in other words, it may be an association or a foundation under Switzerland, or it might be, you may be able to form it under a DAO in somewhere like Wyoming. There are lots of things you could consider, and we're not predicating that it must be this or that, but you need to be aware that it's not straightforward in the regulatory environment. We're looking for feedback and comments on this because we believe that as the world moves forward, and if you hear my colleague Johnny, he talks a bit about some of the things we're thinking about, how you could do this with the DCF. There's lots of considerations, and there's lots of people thinking about it. So when we got to put this paper to start working on this, the DCF concept, we've had considerable input, both legal, from multinationals, from a very diverse set of researchers as well. And there is no one, this will fit everything DCF, because again, it depends on what you want to use the DCF for. Is it for non-governmental? Is it for civil society? Is it for a startup? Is it for a corporation? All of those could use the DCF mechanism for something that's decentralized, but which regulatory framework? There is no one size fits all. More importantly, there are some potential ways of doing it. A practical example of this would be something like the Linux Foundation and the way that's been set up, or again, various other standards organisations. Some are commercial, so like the GSM Association, is an example from past history, or there's quite a few that you could look at as potential examples of associations and legal structures that you could apply to a DCF as well. At this stage, what we're really looking for is feedback, input, and what I've really just talked through is a potential architecture, which we think are the foundational elements that you need to develop a DCF.